Welcome to the GameDev.tv Community Podcast. I'm your host KB, and I would like to introduce you to industry professionals and people who successfully made their path to the video game industry. I hope that you will enjoy the podcast and get useful tips that will bring you closer to achieving your dreams. Now, let's get right into the podcast.
Welcome to the GameDev.tv Community Podcast. I'm your host KB here from LA, and we got Tim Ruswick today. He's the creator of the Game Dev Underground, is an indie game evangelist, content creator, solo game dev, and now part of the GameDev.tv team. So Tim, can you also let the fans know a little bit more about who you are, and then we'll get started from there?
Sure. My name is Tim Ruswick. Over the last 5-ish years, I run a YouTube channel and a game dev community called Game Dev Underground, which helps thousands of people across the planet build, finish, and launch better games. On top of that, I'm a game developer myself, and I've made dozens of games. I've launched my first commercial game on Steam last year, and I've got a card game, a physical card game coming up this year on Kickstarter soon, and I got a lot of other projects in the works. So I'm excited.
Yeah, it looks really cool, right? The Murder Bunnies?
Thanks. Yeah, Murder Bunnies. It's murder and bunnies. You can't go wrong with that.
Yeah, you really can't. It's catchy. You're like, I want to know more about that. Are you trying to release it during like Halloween? Have like a cool special?
So it's a physical game, which means physical games, there's a lot of hidden stuff there, right? Like production and distribution and shipping. We're gonna aim for around there, I think. If Kickstarter goes well, then we're gonna try and get everybody's their copies as soon as possible. But we actually were trying to hit Easter.
Oh,
we thought that would be hilarious to release Murder Bunnies a Kickstarter on Easter, but we didn't make that because time stuff. But
yeah, it happens.
Yeah, it's one of those things.
Well, let's get started back to the beginning. When did you start wanting to do game development? Has it always been a thing when you were younger, or it started later?
I played Halo, the first Halo, and when I got my first Xbox, first of all, I had to save up for I don't even know how long. And I saved up for my Xbox because we didn't have any kind of game consoles. All the consoles we had were like 10, 15 years old. Like we had NES and stuff like that when PlayStation was out. And when I bought my first Xbox, I saved up so much money to just buy it. Like I kept going into the game store and I asked them what's the exact price with tax, because like I was saving up pennies if I could. And when I bought my Xbox, I couldn't even afford any games. So I just bought the
worst. You have the console, but like can't do anything.
I got the
with
console, and the dude felt so bad for me that he opened up one of those old Xbox game magazines with the demo discs, and he gave me one of the demo discs.
And it was Halo?
No, so I saw a thing. It was like a preview of it was like a trailer for Halo 2, and I was like, what is that? So I got to play Halo 1, and so that was one of the first games that I ended up buying, and I was just like, oh my god, this game changed my life because there was just so much cool stuff in it. And I remember thinking, like, how do you make these? Like, what do you do? Like, do you have to like manually draw every screen? Like, what do you do? And I just started. Google was kind of new back then, but I just started Googling around, like how to make games, what to do.
Was this an AOL? Remember the dial-up?
Back in the day, we did have dial-up back then. Yeah, it was crazy. And you have to get off the phone. Like, hey, mom, get off the phone. I'm trying to go on the internet. What is the internet? They don't even know.
I hated that when you're playing a game and someone does a call. I'm like, no, I was in the middle of a game.
Yeah, so I didn't even have my own computer at that point, so I had to do it on like my parents' computer. And like I found Blender, and Blender had a game engine, and I was messing around with stuff in there. And it was literally like figuring stuff out of like, how do I do this thing? And then I eventually found this thing called FPS Creator, which blew my mind because it was like drag and drop map editor, and then you could just play your own FPS game, which that really got me hooked because I was like, okay, so you can make actual games doing this. And the Blender game engine was, I don't even think they have that anymore. It's a modeling tool.
Oh, it's something totally different for Blender now?
Yeah, they had a Blender game engine in their modeling tool, and I used to use it. And they had logic bricks and stuff back then too, so they had like the first type of visual scripting ever. And I messed with stuff back. Yeah, dude, this was. I found some videos the other day of some of the first games that I made, and I'm just like, oh my god, they're horrible. They're horrible, but I was so excited. But that's how I got started. And then I kind of lost my way for a little bit because I everybody was like, "Oh, you need a real job. Congratulations with the game stuff. You need a real job now." And so I'm like, "Oh, well, the dream's not dead. I can go to school for game development, right? Just because I don't know any idea what I'm doing, I can learn there."
Yeah.
So I went to college for 3.5 years for game and simulation programming, and I learned nothing, absolutely nothing, and I took on a lot of debt.
There was no like programming classes, or
there was programming classes, but like I was learning way more from Google than I was from my teachers. And like it's at one of those points, like I had a teacher that like I had made more games then, and it was just like, it was like, what? Why am I here? So I dropped out like 6 months from graduation, like out of principal.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I dropped out. I'm like, this is useless.
You're like, I'm done. This is garbage.
And but at the same time, I had kind of gotten really jaded on like I had just so many people around me telling me you couldn't do it. It's like, you need a real job. You need a real job. So one of the things that I built, if you need the less detailed version of the story, just stop me.
No, keep it coming. This is perfect.
Going into like details here. So I had, for FPS Creator that I mentioned, that it was really cool drag and drop editor, but it was really hard to get your own like models and custom things into it. So it was really great to like build stuff, but you were building stuff with pre-made assets. Mm-hmm. So I built this piece of software called FPSC Toolbox, which basically allowed you to import your own guns and walls and models and all that stuff. You would basically just drag them into the program, and then you would set like your gun shoot speed and like the projectile and all that stuff, and then would just export them. And I made a lot of money with that, and I did really well with that. And one of the reasons why I did is because I had to learn marketing. Because when I first put out the program, I sold it for like $5, and like nobody bought it. Nobody bought it at all. And I was like, why aren't people buying? What was that?
I said, how'd you feel?
Defeated, man. Because I was like, that was one of those things where I knew there was demand for this. Like I needed this program, right? And I'm building these FPS games, and like nobody else. Why aren't people buying this? So it's like I had this extreme confidence of, I know people want this, but they're not buying it. Why? Mm-hmm. So I had to learn marketing. I started Googling around. Same thing I learned game dev. I'm like, how do you sell stuff on the internet? And I learned about marketing. I learned about headlines. I learned about sales page conversions. I learned about all that stuff. And I also learned about perceived value. And so one of the things I did is I changed my price tag from $5 to $29.99. And with that, a little bit of marketing, then I made a bunch of money on it. Everybody started buying it.
That's wild. So
it's
raising
crazy.
The price helped you sell it more?
Yeah.
You wouldn't think that.
I know. It was completely counterintuitive. And that's what got me interested in marketing, because I was like, hold on. None of this makes any sense. Why did that work? Right? Like, why? That paid all my bills for years. When I moved
wow,
out.
It was that good.
It was. I made a ton of money on that program, and I learned a bunch of marketing on the way. And so while everybody's telling me to get a real job, I was like, wait, so like, I know this marketing stuff. That's a real job, right? Like,
yeah, in the world of,
people are going to approve of me if I do the marketing stuff, right? Not the game dev stuff. So I ended up working with this company, this real estate company, doing their marketing and their websites, which I didn't know anything about websites back then either. So I was figuring all that out. But then they had like 18 properties that I ended up managing websites for. And then I could use that as like a portfolio to just keep, saying, hey, I did the websites and marketing for these guys. You should hire me. And then I built a whole marketing company, and I forgot game dev existed.
How long was this for? Like a couple years?
5-6 years. It was.
Wow.
It was from
what was this, like when you were like 22, 23?
It was like, so I moved to LA with just my suitcase when I was like 19, I think.
Really? Just by yourself?
Yeah. Well, I went up there to visit my dad with a suitcase, and then I just never went back home. Because that real estate company I mentioned, when I talked to them, they had offered me, because my dad was friends with them, and basically what they said is like, we need someone in marketing, but we can't pay anybody. But we have 18 real estate properties with tons of like lofts and empty spaces, so you can live here, but we can't pay you. And I was like, all right, I'll live in an empty loft and figure this all out. So that's kind of what I did. I just took the leap of faith there. And then my program was still selling, so that's how I was actually making money. And yeah, it was a crazy journey. But then, like, that kind of started a marketing company, and that kind of got me in that whole journey. And then, I was doing really, really well. And then I got in the whole startup scene of like, okay, I need to be a millionaire and I need to like do all this. And I got lost in
Gotta get the Lambos, the mansions.
Yeah, exactly. I just overworked myself and just made myself hate everything. And I made a bunch more money. And then the money made everything worse because I was just like, I thought this was supposed to make it better, and it's not making it better. And then in 2015, I was just so stressed, I ended up just selling the company and just taking my Dodge Challenger on a road trip. Just said, I'm out. I just left everything again, just the same way I entered in. I was just like, sold it, went on.
Where'd you go?
I went everywhere, man. I went to San Francisco. I went to Roswell, New Mexico. I went to Grand Canyon. I went just like everything I could think of. I just went all over the United States. So Texas, Louisiana, like all kinds
just
of
chilling. Like you were just
traveling. I would
Yeah.
go there and I would stay as long as I wanted, and then when I got bored, I would just leave and go to a different state.
Is that when you started a YouTube channel, or is this still before that? You just took a
This
huge
is still
break.
before the YouTube channel. That's what I was saying. If I'm giving you too many details, you can tell me.
No, this is wild. I never knew this. I just always assumed you did games all the time.
No, this is the journey of me rediscovering games again, right? But by the way, so I hadn't got back into games, but during the road trip time, I had started Game Dev Underground, the website, because like I was starting to realize that like I went through like this weird existential crisis of like I'm unhappy. What makes me happy? And I started realizing all the stuff from like childhood, like. I've never felt that crazy happiness as I did sitting in front of a computer just building crazy stuff, right? That's just like ultimate, like I just like building stuff, right? And so Game Dev Underground was the thing that I was trying to do, and I was trying to like basically connect with game developers because I didn't know any, and I always felt like alone in all of my game dev, even as a kid. It was just like I felt like this extreme,
Like no one else did it.
yeah,
That's how I felt too back in Florida. I was like, guys, I do game development. They're like, that's a thing.
Yeah,
like yeah. What do you mean?
Yeah,
people have to make the games.
Yeah, people just don't get it, and then they don't. And then not only that, but it requires so many different skill sets that it's like, it's very isolating, but it's very complicated too. And
it's really complicated.
People
don't understand. It's not easy at all.
They don't get it. And then like you show somebody a tree you made, and they're like, "Oh, well, Far Cry has better trees than that."
And you're like,
Thanks.
but I made this.
That's helpful. Right? Yeah. So, yeah, it's just, again, I wasn't back in that world. Like, I think I had downloaded Unity and, like, got really discouraged because, like, it took me 8 hours to get a ball rolling across the screen. And I was just like,
you were like, no, I'm done. I'm not made for this anymore.
No. And then I tried, like, the Android SDK, and it took me, like, the whole day just to get it configured because I needed these different packages and all this stuff. And
it's confusing to just get any app built with that thing. I got it to like do something once, and I was like, "Cool, I'm a programmer," and then never touched it ever again.
Same. I was messing around because I had web dev knowledge at this point, so I was messing around with apps. I had made a few like, but they were like HTML apps wrapped into like an iOS Android wrapper.
Oh, okay.
But like clients couldn't tell the difference, so they're like, "I need an app," and I was like,
okay. "Here it is." Technically,
yeah, exactly. They're like, "Yay." They don't know the difference. So yeah, I was dabbling, and then I was looking for different like game creation software, and I came across Game Salad and like a bunch of
Game Salad.
Yeah, there's a thing called Game Salad that I made a few things in, but then I eventually came across Construct 2, which was the perfect mix of like fast prototyping but also easy to learn, and it like I think it jived with my brain a little bit because I was just like, yeah, like I have too much ADD to like sit down for 8 hours to make a ball roll, right?
Yeah.
Like I need more stimulation than that to like create stuff. So I was messing around with apps in that too, and I had built a few things, but nothing crazy. And I was still like alone. I still felt like isolated, especially now. Like I'm basically living out of my car, driving across the country. Like I'm super alone now. But yeah, so I ended up in Florida for Mother's Day in 2015, I think. And because it was
Where in Florida?
Is in Sarasota, like probably like an hour south of Tampa. I was in Louisiana and I was like, oh, Mother's Day is in like 2 days, so I like let me go visit my mom because she lived down there. And I ended up like just sleeping on her couch for a little bit because why not? And then I just remember like that brought back so many memories too of like, oh, this game design stuff, this game dev stuff. And that's when I started the YouTube channel. That's when I started sharing it. And I didn't really have any game dev stuff to share at first. So if you go back to like the beginning of my channel, it's all marketing stuff. It's all like
marketing games or marketing anything.
Yeah, well, I had marketed a few games with my marketing company because like that was kind of the overlap of my interest in games, but also my experience in marketing. So I'd kind of like I was trying to inch myself towards there. It seems like in retrospect, right? Like I was trying to like get back to it like subconsciously. So yeah, everything that I shared was just pure marketing stuff about game dev though. And like my first few videos weren't even of me talking. They were just like whiteboard animated videos that I was using this software to animate.
Really? Like those cool ones where they draw on them while they're talking and like draws really well and I never understand how they do it?
Yeah, I found a piece of software that does that. So I was like, ooh, that's how they do it. So I started using the software.
So you actually have to draw it, right? But like it doesn't look like it.
No, you can plop images in. So you can draw, but the software comes with a bunch of pre-made images like circles and smiley faces and people and stuff. And then it just animates the little hand around it.
Okay.
So it was perfect for me because I was like, I don't really want a camera, and I just want to make content. And oh my God, was that a struggle? I would spend an entire week animating a video, like putting all this research into it, trying to help people, and then I would try to link it around in like Facebook groups, and people would just attack me.
Attack you for what?
Attack me like you don't know what you're talking about. Who are you? You got 3 subscribers. Why are you sharing this info? Like I was just like, because I want to help.
Like I want to.
Like, and then it would make
Did you feel more alone?
Yeah, it made me feel because I'm just like now I can't even like. I found a Facebook group finally with people, and like now they're like upset that I tried to help. Like. How do you do this? How do people even make friends? Like, what is this life? Like, what, like what's going on? But they would do things like I remember I linked a video. I don't know why this triggered me so much, but like I linked a video, and then the only comment on it was somebody linking a video on a similar subject from like extra credits. That's it. They just linked extra credits. Just said, yeah, you're irrelevant, dude. Just there's only a video on this on the entire internet.
That's so messed up for someone to do that.
Yeah, I was just like, dude, and it was such a struggle to get to like that first 100 subscribers, right? It was just like, oh my God, it took so much work because the videos were taking so much work, and then all that, and then I was trying to make games, but I was still like I couldn't figure all this stuff out. Like I couldn't really get anywhere. I was still learning all this stuff. Yeah, and then I did a video or two that got better reception, and I gained a few hundred subscribers from a video.
Wow.
I was like, whoa, maybe there's a trick to this, right? Like maybe you could do this. And then I started working on game stuff, and I just started sharing what I was doing and started live streaming, and that's kind of how Game Dev Underground started, of just want to share people. I forgot about that because you're on Skype. There's one part of this that I missed out. Back in the day, Game Dev Underground, I used to do every Friday. We used to do Friday night hangouts, and we would do them on Skype. I created a Skype group.
I brought it back from the dead.
It did bring back memory. We'd create this group, and then we would just like chat, and we would hang out. And the original Game Dev Underground, by the way, the website was supposed to be like marketing pages for your games. That was the idea of like, if you want to add your game to the thing, then you get like a marketing and sales page for it and all that. And Itch came along, and I was just like, well, Itch is just better.
Yeah.
It's everything I want to do, but better. It's just
better. So yeah, might as well use that.
Yeah, let's just use Itch. And then I kind of abandoned Game Dev Underground as a website, and Game Dev Underground became for a blog for a while, but then it became a YouTube channel. I was always just trying to share stuff that I learned and help people and try to connect with people. Really, I think that was the underlying drive of like, I just want to connect with other humans that do the same thing that I do.
Mm-hmm.
There's
nothing wrong with that. Yeah.
Yeah, but it just
build
felt
a community.
And I didn't know there was other communities around. I guess I probably should have checked in retrospect. Like it would have been easier to just go find one than to
Hey,
build
but at least
one.
you have your own now.
Right, and it's great, and I love it. And now the whole GameDev.tv stuff. You guys are a big family too, and it's nice to kind of be part of this community. And I love that game dev is becoming. It's a bigger and better thing than it ever was like 10, 15 years ago. It's becoming huge.
Yeah, I think it was even like statistics about the esports or the game awards. The views are they're way up, and the Grammys are way down. And I guess everybody's moving towards video games. It's becoming the normal thing now, which is so weird because when I was younger, it was like games. You play games. Games are nothing. Just people in their basement playing. Now it's like people making $1 million with games. Games are talked by everybody. Everybody's playing them. I'm like, what happened? But I love it because this is what I want.
It's crazy. And I think games now make more than movies and music combined. Like,
really?
Annually. Yeah. In sales and revenue. It's crazy. Like these games, like you just think $200 million for a movie was a big budget, but some of these games have $500 million budget, like Grand Theft Auto and shit.
Oh,
like,
yeah. Grand Theft Auto is huge. What are some of the big games? Call of Duty franchise, huge.
Yeah, they make so much money, and not only that, but I think there's an opportunity for like indies too. Like, you don't have to make these crazy AAA experiences. You can do something like interesting or unique or aesthetically pleasing or fascinating or great from a storytelling perspective. You could just have these one little hook and you can kind of pull people in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, I think it's a good time to be alive. It's a good time to be in game development. I mean, we've the downside to it is there's thousands of people, right? And like your game is kind of in a sea of other games. Yeah. But the upside to it is that like your game is also in a sea of people that want to play games, right? Mm-hmm. So there's pros and cons to it.
Yeah, it's hard to like, you get discouraged when you're like, I made a game and nobody's playing it. But it's like, I guess that's where marketing comes in, and just like you have to build a community for people to enjoy your game. And what about Hades? Is Hades like a AAA game, or was that an indie game that became really popular?
The line gets a little blurry there, because I think it's arguable that Supergiant is like an indie studio, but their past several games have done better and better and better. Now Hades is like literally on the top of every list. Yeah. I don't know how many people they have in their company. It depends on how you define indie. Like personally, I define indie as independent creative control over your creations, like outside of investors and something like that. And I think under that definition, they fall as indie, like Clay too. Clay made like Oxygen Not Included and Don't Starve and Mark of the Ninja and all those games. But like, yeah, it depends. A lot of people think indie is like the underdog. So like once you make $1 million or whatever, you're not indie anymore. I don't really see it that way. I just see it as independent creative control. And I think they have that. And I think they've shown that that's valuable.
Yeah. And also what's awesome is social media now. So once everybody talks about it, everybody wants to play it. So yeah, your game could become popular if you just market it right. You get it out there. Yeah.
Yeah, I spent a lot of my life thinking, like, kind of regretting the whole marketing side. Like, why didn't I just stick to games the whole time? But coming back to it, it's like, whoa, like I've got an advantage here. Like I know this stuff. Not only that, but weirdly, a lot of marketing has to do with really understanding a customer, right? So like, if I want to sell somebody something, I got to really understand their needs and understand why this product is good for their needs or why it's not, right? Like really good salesmen will tell you this is not the right product for you, right? Sleazy salesmen will try and sell you shit you don't need, but like really good salesmen will just be like, no, this isn't a good fit for you. And I think that has helped me become a better game developer because in having to empathize with the people that I sell stuff to, really understand them, to understand the words that I say to get them interested to buy. It also gives me the empathy to like understand the mechanics I add to the game to get people to feel, right? Like it makes me really understand the people and the emotions behind things and makes me a better experienced designer because I've had so much experience kind of like diving into the minds of people that are not me. And
it's perfect for games then.
Yeah, exactly. Like it seems to translate really, really well. And on top of that, like I know how to sell my game a little bit. So I think a lot of people like, because I see a lot of new game developers and stuff, and I see them like a lot of times they're just like, oh, I want to make this thing, but they're never actually thinking about the player or like putting their brain into the shoes of somebody that's going to play through this experience, right? And it's a super valuable skill.
So how do you think someone who doesn't have your background is wanting to make games, wanting to sell them, how can they get started to think about more about the player, the person who's going to play the game?
I think, well, first of all, you just have to be conscious of that, right? You have to know that that's even a problem, because a lot of people are just unaware. They don't ever think about anybody but themselves. They just make the thing they want to make, and then they put it out there, and then people are confused, and they don't understand why. So I think being conscious of it is probably step one. Once you're aware of it, I think feedback early and often can really, really help you kind of understand that, because you'll find people that think very differently than you, and they'll give you feedback, and it may be kind of hard to hear at first. Like this whole part is confusing. Like I don't know what to click or where to go. And in your mind, you're like, oh, well, you just click the pink thing. It's easy. Like, but you designed it, and you put that there, and you know why it's there. And you've been through the whole reasoning of why it's there.
It just makes sense for you, but most people, it doesn't.
Yeah.
I've seen it with my friend when we're playing Detroit Become Human. Like for me, I could pick up things pretty easily, but even for like him, he doesn't. And so like, can you imagine if like it was confusing like that for everyone, then nobody would want to play your game because they get frustrated or it doesn't have that same cinematic experience. So yeah, you really got to do a lot of testing and have different clues and just realize that not every game is the same.
Yeah. I think a lot of people too, they have this thing where it's like, well, I want to make the game that I want to make, right? And I shouldn't have to make sacrifices for other people. And it's like, but you're not designing it for just you. If you're designing a game only you're going to play, go for it. But like, if you're trying to share this experience with thousands of other people, you got to put the thought in to make it enjoyable for thousands of other people.
That's so key. Yeah. I don't think anyone's ever mentioned it like that. Like, hey, you want to make something for people, make it for them, not for just for yourself.
Right.
Because then you just get like an ego thing. It's like, I just make this game because I want to play games.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, that's fine, but they're just not going to play your thing. So what's going to hurt your ego more? Like designing experience for them or like having nobody play your thing? But there's so much like usability stuff in it too, right? Like it's making it accessible. Like if you make like a city builder and you have like 25 buildings, like if you spend a couple weeks designing experience where it's like you start with 3 and then like you unlock like, a few more when you do this, and then like just kind of like a basic tutorial experience of like walking them through each little mechanic and each little building one at a time. That's going to be infinitely better than if you dump them in a room with 25 buildings and say, figure it out, right? Which is where a lot of game developers, that's where they do it. Because they're like, I did Feedback Friday a lot, where I basically play community games on Fridays and kind of give them feedback. And I found that a lot of games that I played were a lot like tech demos rather than games. Like they're more like, here's an example of all of this technology working. But there's no like intro to like how to play the thing. And from what I found, that's like, if you think about it, people play games in a linear experience, right? They start at the beginning and they end at the end, right? Most people never make it to the end. Matter of fact, a very small percentage, probably 10 to 20% on average, makes it to the end of a game. So if you think about that first like hour is where the vast majority of people are ever going to experience your game ever. Yeah. To some people, that's the only thing they're going to experience of your game is that first hour, right? And the problem is like a lot of people get their games linearly and they put all the time in the end, right? They should be putting the time in the beginning because that's where most people are going to experience it.
I think you mentioned that in a video with you and Rick. You were playing this one game. It was like a rainy 2D platformer, and like you can go inside a building and like jump out the building, but like I forgot what it was, but yeah, I think you mentioned like that where it's like focus in the beginning because that's where you're gonna get most people, because most people might not go past that first hour, which is true. And if you don't hook them, that just happens to me. I'll play games. I'm like, I'm not feeling it. Never touch the game again. Yeah, you gotta hook the player. So how do you think you can hook them? Like, what should they spend their time on at the beginning of the game?
It's really gonna depend on the genre, I think. I think generally you want to have quick wins. This is something Rick always says all the time, and I kind of stole it from him. But speaking of Rick, he always talks about quick wins, right? And he designs courses and stuff, so he's talking about it in a course context of like if you're teaching somebody something in a course, you want to give them something immediately to kind of get them hooked. Like, oh, here's something cool that you can do right away. So now let's learn like the idea behind it, right? That's kind of the philosophy of the GameDev.tv courses. But I think the same thing applies to games as well, is like right up front, you need to give some instant gratification of like, here's a cool thing you can do, right? Like if you have an interesting like whip mechanic or swing mechanic or something like that, you want to get them into that as soon as possible, right?
Mhm.
Like that's the basic thing. But you don't necessarily want to get them into that with the 10 million enemies that you have in the game, right? You maybe want to just give them that mechanic ASAP without any enemies. Just
Mhm.
here, use it, figure it out, understand it, like get to it. And then you introduce enemy 1, right? Okay, well now you got to do it over a hole in the ground. Now you got to do it over a hole in the ground with things shooting at you or whatever. So I think understanding the kind of the attention span of an average person, and how when an average person learns a new thing, it's exciting. It feels good to learn stuff. But especially when it's like a small little mechanic, like a swinging dude, it doesn't last very long. You get 3 to 5 minutes out of that, maybe. Like
Unless it's
excitement.
Spider-Man, I could go hours swinging in that game.
But the open world adds a lot to something like Spider-Man, though, too, right? Because like there's a discovery happening, right? And there's all kinds of events, and there's like exploration and all that other stuff. So that's really important too. Like if you can get a game loop like Spider-Man is a perfect example, because that game loop has worked for many generations of consoles of just like swinging through New York City. It's just so much fun, right?
It is. I don't get it. And now it's cool with the PlayStation 5 controller. You feel like you're actually shooting webs. So I get lost. And then it plays the music, the ray tracing. Oh, just got lost in New York for hours.
But that's a good example of like a really good solid loop. But at the same time, if you just like a lot of the mechanics you have to kind of introduce, because if you throw them all in at once, one, people are going to lose stuff, but two, like people end up playing kind of the way that they want to play. So like I don't know if you play fighting games, but like the way that I play fighting games is I just smash all the buttons.
Yeah, same. I don't know. I just don't want to like read.
There's too many.
There's too much, and it's just Everybody's like, you gotta read the thing. And I'm like, come on, I'll win by smash. And they hate that. They hate when you smash the buttons. I'm like, come on, I just want to play my way.
Hate it, but then you win, and it's like, well, who's actually better then? If I can smash the buttons and win, like, listen.
They blame me like, oh, you just button smashing. I'm like, if you're better, then you should have beat me.
It's been a while since I played a fighting game, but from what I recall, like those games are not actually very good at kind of showing you all the different combos. Like they have like lists, so that you can go like press a button and then you'll like see the giant list of combos that you could do for that character. But it's like nobody wants to like read through that list. It's like, no, I don't got time for that. Okay, like no, I smash them and accidentally do that, and then it's fine. But if like, for example, if they could introduce like, okay, well you can kick with this button, so do a few kicks. Okay, but if you kick, now you can punch. So do a few punches. Now, if you kick and you punch together, then you could do this other thing. And if they introduce it like slower and more methodical, and it's comprehensible, there's a lot more like retention there. Because one, I feel smart from learning. Two, like you haven't overloaded me and shut me down, right? And three, you're building upon everything that you're teaching me, right? Like that combo part is really important too, because like. That's the other part that games get wrong a lot, I think, is here's mechanic 1, here's mechanic 2, here's mechanic 3, and then it just becomes like a mechanic spaghetti, right? Where it's like, it's why though? But if mechanic 1 and mechanic 2 are cool, and then if you do mechanic 1 and mechanic 2 together, it's even more interesting. Those are the games that like really kind of tend to hook people, because it's like, oh, I get this, and I get why they're useful, and it feels coherent and it feels consistent.
So the bad way would be game spaghetti. What would be the good way? Like a sandwich?
Food metaphors?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a sandwich is good because it's layered.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would definitely layer stuff on. I would think of yourself making a sandwich, right? You start with the bread, and then you put the thing on, and then you combine it all. And then at the end of the thing, you have the sandwich that you can eat and taste everything together.
Perfect.
The real stuff is here at the GameDev.tv podcast.
Yep, talking about food.
Yeah, making me hungry.
Right. Oh, I want some steak with some sweet potatoes. So I'm curious, how did you come up with Game Dev Underground? No, it's because you were like the underground where everybody can meet and have this cool like secret.
I guess. This is the problem. I looked at the Twitter account the other day, and the Game Dev Underground Twitter account just turned 10 years old. So it's part of it is just me being younger of like, oh, it'd be super cool if like it's an underground and like not everybody can get in. Guys, it'd be super awesome. We're like hackers.
I love it.
But I think originally with the website, it was invite only. So like it was kind of like you had to be invited and then everybody got a recruit number and all this stuff. And it was like, it's supposed to be like this cool invite only thing. And yeah, it evolved a lot. It evolved a lot over time. And I'm not really sold on the name anymore, to be honest. I tried to change the name once and everybody freaked out.
What did you change it to?
I was gonna change it to Game Hatch. But even that, I like looking back, I'm just like, that's kind of worse. So like, I don't know.
Game Hatch.
Because it was clever, right? So it's like a hatch that you put games in, but also like game hatch, like an egg hatching, like, you know.
Oh, I mean, I guess I never thought of that.
I was super clever, dude. I thought I put so much thought into that, and then but it was like, no, we like Game Dev Underground, and I'm like, all right, whatever. You guys, I don't care enough to change it. There's gonna be too much work to rebrand and relogo and everything anyway.
Just gotta follow the crypto hype. Put like Game Dev to the moon.
There you go.
Now, in your experience, what is the biggest mistake you see most aspiring game developers make?
That's a big one. I think, well, it depends on kind of what category. I think we're talking about some of the bigger design mistakes. The intro to your game is super important. I do think a lot of people, this is something that I'm just kind of learning actually. And I've been asked this question a few times, but it's like every time I get asked, I have like a different answer because I'm like a different level of where I'm at in game dev.
Yeah, like a better understanding.
Right. Yeah. So I'm working on, so Murder Bunnies Kickstarter is launching on May 17th. And that was a game that came out of BattleBard Tactics. So I made a game called BattleBard Tactics, which is currently in progress still. And it's about 7 different animal factions that are all fighting each other in a little chessboard tactics game. Murder Bunnies is one of the factions, so that kind of came out of it. But I realized with kind of that game that you need an interesting aesthetic. You need an interesting, just like you need a mechanical hook, you need an aesthetic hook, right? So you think of like Darkest Dungeon, right? Darkest Dungeon is a great example of like an aesthetic hook. Like it just, whoa, that game looks different than everything else on the market. And something I say often is like, if anybody can confuse your game with another game in a screenshot, you're doing it wrong, right? Like they absolutely should not be able to confuse your game with another game.
Yeah, that'd be the worst. Like, oh, it's this game. It's like, no, it's not. It's my game. Yeah.
And that's the problem with like, I think like Unity and the asset store and stuff is it's making that problem a little bit worse. Like you get a lot of people using the same engine, using the same assets, and like the games start to kind of, they're like these 3D open world games that you see so many of, and they're just kind of, they kind of blur together and they're just not very distinct. So financially, marketing wise, I think one of the biggest mistakes is not making your game aesthetically distinct. And that's something I put a lot of work into, especially for like Murder Bunnies, for example, of like, it's really hard to confuse that game with another game, right? Because of the name, because of the color palette, because of like the, you know, the whole murder aspect of it. Like,
yeah, I think that's the biggest one. I don't think I've seen a game like that. What is Murder Bunnies?
So Murder Bunnies is a 2-player tactical card game where you kill for carrots and murder your friends. And it is basically, it's like a tactics game on a grid in card game form. You've got a couple action points every turn. You use those action points to either capture a new bunny, spawn bunnies, murder bunnies, that kind of thing. But it's basically you're fighting your opponent on a grid, and you can move or attack kind of every turn in whatever combination. But the cool thing about Murder Bunnies is that the entire deck is made up of 40 unique characters, 40 unique bunnies. And each bunny has its own ability that has a trigger effect on it. So some bunnies have an effect that spawns or that triggers when they spawn, some when they attack, some when they like get attacked, some when like some random event happens. And it's very strategic because it ends up in this like weird like strategy kind of situation where it's like you're on a grid battling a bunch of other bunnies trying to murder them for their carrots.
I love it. That's so neat.
But at the same time, it's like there's all these like bunnies out there with like traps. So like if you attack this guy, then he will automatically explode and he'll kill everybody next to him. So it's like, who do you attack him with, right? Or like when do you attack him? Or can you find a way to move him next to their own bunny and make them explode each other? right?
Smart
Yeah.
tactic.
So it's very fast paced. It's very much focused on murder. It's a 2-player game that takes about 15 minutes to play. And we put a lot of work into it to make it just very murder filled. And it's a lot of fun. And I would love to make maybe like a video game version of it or something someday. But I think it works fantastic as a card game. And normally I would stick to video games because that's what I've made dozens of and I have experience in. But
yeah, what made you want to do a like physical game, card game?
so I've designed a bunch of card games like over my life because I used to, as a kid, I was a competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon player. I used to go to tournaments and stuff.
Wow, really?
Yeah,
That's wild.
I've won tournaments and stuff like that. So it was something I loved to do. Every Saturday, Sunday, my brother and I would go to tournaments and like compete like on the regional or whatever level that we're on. And I've always wanted to design a card game, but one of the things I hated about card games was if you've ever been to a tournament for like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Pokemon, what ends up happening is a new set comes out, everybody figures out the best cards in those sets, and then everybody figures out the best decks to run with that combination of cards. So you end up in every tournament, you end up with the same 3 to 5 decks. And if you're not running that deck is the best deck, you can't compete. You can't win. And I always hated that.
Everybody has the same Pokemon then.
Yeah, it's stupid. It's stupid. And one of my favorite parts about card games was always the deck building aspect of it, right? Of like I like to look at all the cards and like figure out cool combos to like put these cards together, right? And like make this ultimate deck that I'm then going to use against my opponent. But it's like you can't do that at a tournament level because you're either using the good decks or you're not, right? And it frustrated me so much. So when about a year ago, a little bit after COVID hit, I got super burned out with what I was doing because I was working on Battleborn and I was working on it every single day, and I hadn't given myself a break in a long time, and so I kind of quit YouTube for a little bit. But I still wanted to make games, but I was still super burned out, and for some reason my brain was just like computer equals bad. But messing around with like physical cards, I was like, that's fine, that's cool, that's, you know, my brain was fine with that. So I just started prototyping. I ended up with like a chessboard and army men. I was just putting them together, like figuring out how to do cool stuff, and then ended up with written cards, and then just prototyping. My girlfriend Alyssa, we went back and forth on it. She's a co-designer in the game, so she's helped tremendously with everything. She put up with the crazy ideas that I've had and like helped me play test and everything.
That's awesome.
And then so I had these like handwritten cards because I found these blank cards on Amazon, and I was just drawing on them. But I had the Murder Bunnies art from Battleborn because the Murder Bunnies were already a faction in Battleborn Tactics, and so I just kind of plopped that art in there to just kind of get some basic art going. And I was like, you know what? This is a game about murder. It kind of totally makes sense, right? Like, let's just go with the Murder Bunnies aesthetic. And then we did, and then the game was so solid. Like, I don't think I would have considered a card game because it's harder to produce. Like, there's costs involved. There's hard costs involved, right? Like, out of the $20, you got to spend X amount of dollars actually making the thing and shipping the thing, right? So it's a lot more complicated, but at the same time, like, I feel so confident in this game. I've never felt more confident in a strategy game that I've designed ever. It's just such a solid game. And Alyssa and I have played it so many times just for fun. And there's so many times where we play and we're like, we want to play again. We want to play a game. And I've never felt like that with one of my games before. Normally I'm sick of them, you know?
Yeah.
Just like, get them out of my face. I'm done.
I'm excited. I want to pre-order it. So the Kickstarter releases May 17th, right?
Yes.
It's not already out? Okay.
And then it's going to take us 3 to 6 months to deliver on everything. So currently it's set to deliver December-ish, but that's us, you know, hoping that we can get it before then. But yeah, it's exciting. So like, if the Kickstarter does well, you know, we'll get to make the game. If it doesn't, we'll learn a bunch of lessons about what we did wrong.
A Kickstarter,
yeah.
I think it should, especially with both communities now, Game Dev and Game Dev Underground.
Yeah, it is weird though, because I have like a video game community. And I'm making a physical card game in the middle of a pandemic, so it may not be the right time. But it's like, I feel so.
By December, everybody should be vaccinated. Everybody will want to go hang out with their friends, and it's not like something that it's only 2 players, so you can have your brothers and sisters, your family, roommates.
Yeah, I'm not really thinking about the timing. I'm just thinking about like the world needs to see this game because I'm super excited about it. I've never felt so it brought back so many like childhood memories of like me and my brother, you know, like going to these tournaments. But at the same time, like I really feel like I solved the deck problem, right? Because in this game, there's a row of like 3 cards that any player can pick from, and you can use one of your action points to actually take those cards as you need them. And so you're kind of building out your hand as the game progresses, and it's one deck for each for like it's a shared deck for each player. So it makes every game different, and it gets rid of that like whole deck problem that I always hated in tournament level play. But at the same time, it's like a super deep strategic game, so I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, me too. And so, do you think if you become successful, you'll ever have like Murder Bunny tournaments?
I don't know. That's an interesting idea, right? I
Yeah.
think the game is definitely strategically and deep enough to do that. And I would consider that. The game would have to do really well though to pull that off. I don't. It's a whole new territory for me, to be honest. Like the whole physical space is terrifying. It's terrifying because everything costs money and like everything requires volume. Like you can't just get 10 games printed, right? You have to get like 500 or 1,000 to make them like viable price wise. So
Yeah.
you need something like Kickstarter to like get a bunch of orders at one time. I don't know. Yeah, I would love to. I would love that so much, but I don't know if we could pull it off.
We'll see. Time will tell.
Yeah.
And so you said you got burnt out last year. How did you like deal with that? And how did you know to like make the switch? Because I know most people would be like, oh, maybe I just need to keep pushing through, or maybe this isn't for me.
Right.
Like, what was your process like?
Well, it gets tricky, right? So like that's one of the things I've preached about in the past is that you've got to push through stuff. And for Phylophobia, I got really burnt out when I released that game. Took me 4 years to make, and when I finally released it on Steam, it was like 5 years later. And there's so many times I got burnt out in that game, but I had to like push through it to actually release it. But I realized that in doing that, in a lot of ways, I had caused more damage than I had like fixed. Right, like on one hand, I had achieved this great dream of mine as a kid to release a game commercially, like on Steam, and have people give me money for it, which was like insane, right? And I wanted to do that ever since I was a little kid. But on the other hand, like I had really sacrificed a lot of mental health to get that game done. And so when I started feeling the same way about Battleborn Tactics, and actually I did it on a game called Cypherpunk right before that too. So it was starting to happen more and more often. And I was like, what's going on here? Like, why am I feel like my capacity is reducing and my burnout is getting worse every time. And so I was like, I need to chill. And it was weird because it was the opposite of what I've kind of been taught and what I've kind of mentioned to other people. Like there's all this like hustle stuff on the internet of like, you just got to hustle and you just got to work 16 hours a day. And like, you're never working hard enough in this whole, especially in American culture. Like it's a big part
It's the worst.
It is. They call it
It's
hustle.
so bad.
Right?
Like it doesn't always mean more of quality work.
Right.
It just
Especially
means
creatively.
Yeah. Like yeah, especially creatively. Like, a lot of people feel like being busy is like, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm busy. Like, yay for you. But it's like, no. In fact, you might be busy doing the wrong things.
Right.
Like being busy shouldn't be celebrated that much. It should just be doing great work and enjoying your life while doing it.
Well, I had this epiphany that like being busy all the time is a form of laziness.
Whoa.
And I was like, yeah, because if you think about it, like a lot of people stay busy to avoid the thought work, or they stay busy to avoid their mental work, right?
Mm-hmm.
They just think that doing more is going to help, when really they just need to reassess and like think through things and think how it's going to impact and all that. And that's when I was really like, okay, so I need to chill out a little bit. Like this is not a failure of mine stopping working. This is actually me succeeding. This is actually me taking care of myself. This is actually me preparing to do better work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I took some time off. I still wanted to make games, but like I said, I still felt this like weird aura around my computer, and I didn't want to touch it for a little while. And so I started just messing with like the physical stuff, and I started playing with all these physical prototypes, and Murder Bunnies ended up coming out of that, but there was like 10 or 15 different physical prototypes that I made, and that really helped because it was like I realized that prototyping is kind of my hobby. It's a thing that I enjoy. For the first time I had this project, because that was the other downside of Game Dev Underground too, is like suddenly I have all these people watching everything I do. Every time I'm designing a game, thousands of people are watching it and giving me feedback. And on one hand, it's fantastic, right? I get all this visibility. People see my stuff. On the other hand, it's like the stress and the pressure is debilitating. It's crushing. Like all these people are watching everything that you do.
Yeah,
and
how do you deal with that too?
that's a whole nother issue. I was making it worse too because I was streaming my game dev. So now it's not just like the fire hose of feedback. It's the fire hose of feedback during the creative process as I'm designing. You know what I mean? Like creative process is iterative. You start with something bad,
Yeah.
and then you make it better, and then you make it better, and then finally you're happy with it. And it's like people on Twitch were seeing me starting with something bad and just berating me with all the feedback, and it's like, it's not even done.
Yeah, you're like, I just
chill out.
started.
Yeah. Like they're telling me, oh, you should do this, like as I'm drawing the circle. Like that's not even a head yet of a character, right? Like, so I was making it worse for myself by kind of doing all that. But I realized that like my hobby is prototyping and game design, but it's also my job. And I had to separate the work of like finishing a commercial game from the fun of like prototyping and creating stuff. And so one of the things that like the physical card game stuff allowed me to do is there was no expectations. So like I wasn't planning on having anything commercial. Like it was just, I want to create fun stuff, right? I just want to make it. And then the other like situation change of like now on the computer, but I'm like actually touching and feeling stuff and drawing on stuff. And so that actually helped me quite a bit of like coming out of that. And then Murder Bunnies is the first game that I've went against my own advice on, because marketing wise, you should be sharing your game the whole time and kind of getting a community and all that. But Murder Bunnies, I didn't tell anybody about until it was done, until the game was complete.
Was that marketing wise or because of your like burnout?
That was because of the burnout stuff.
Okay.
It's because this game kind of helped me through the burnout, right? It kind of helped me. It was a thing that I was making, and I think part of what made it so enjoyable is that nobody was in it except me and Alyssa. It was just something that we made together, right? Like we were just working on this thing and just making it cool, and then we showed it to people. Now, to kind of defend that too, because marketing wise, you do need to kind of show a few people. We've been doing a lot of playtesting. We've been like the Kickstarter campaign got delayed and a bunch of stuff because we're showing it off to people now. So even though the game design is done and the game has been designed and fully complete, there's a lot to like show and get people excited about and share all that stuff. So it's a different process for sure. But I think for me, it was so much more enjoyable of just not having people breathing down my neck or doing feedback in kind of phases, right? So it's like, okay, I do a bunch of stuff and then get a bunch of feedback and then do a bunch of stuff and then get a bunch of feedback, rather than like the process I had been doing before of like sharing everything all the time. Because it was just too much for me to handle, like just mental health wise. You're being bombarded by every opinion ever. You kind of lose your own voice because everything else is so loud.
Mm-hmm. How do you drown out the noise? You just go silent on social media, YouTube, or?
Yeah, I've been talking to people about this. I got to figure out a better way to do that, because right now, like what I end up doing is like deleting Twitter and Facebook from my phone. Like I had to remove Facebook completely. Staying off of places, staying out of Discord servers, like isolating myself basically, which is not. I don't know if that's the healthiest way to deal with it, or I don't know if there is a healthy way to deal with it, but I feel like the more noise that I have, the harder it is to kind of hear my own voice. And so I do spend kind of a lot of time isolating and just doing my own thing now. And I do it in phases, like I said. So like I'll make stuff, and then when I'm ready for the feedback, I'll go to those places and get the feedback. And then I'll go back to like my little cave and I'll just work on stuff. That seems to be what works the best for me. But I also know that I'm one of those people that's kind of extra sensitive to like just input. Right, like I'm sensitive to everything. One of the reasons I wear a hat is because the light is too. I'm just like that, and I've realized that for my own mental health, I kind of have to isolate a little bit, just get my grounding, my introverted cave.
No, I think that's why mental health is an issue nowadays, is because everybody's on social media. They're seeing people living like better lives. They're seeing
Right.
people creating stuff, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I want to do that." Like, and for artists, this is hard. When you go on Instagram, you see all these other artists making these insane artwork, and you're like, "I'll never get there." It's like you need to drown all that noise. Go into your
Yeah.
cave, make your stuff, come out, and then show the world what you have. Because, like you
Right.
said before, like people were attacking you for things that you haven't even made yet when we were starting the process of game design. It's like I think we've lost touch with the idea of like, hey, let's go do our own thing, drown out the noise, make something original, work on it, come out into the world, show the world, oh, this is your feedback. Let me go back and work on it and come back out, and
Right.
like that's it. And like I don't need to show the world I'm doing 24/7. I don't know. Like for instance, I don't know how streamers do it. Like constantly playing games, constantly doing these things. I'm like, don't you need time for yourself, time for your
Right.
friends, your family, your own creative process? Because like when it's quiet, it's the best to just come up with ideas, to work on your thing, to do your
Yeah.
thing. So I don't know, because I find it like a lot of people were saying it's it's just hard doing this. I just keep seeing games being made, or my game's not gonna be good enough, or I'm just like, don't worry about what anybody else is doing. Create your
Right.
stuff, learn from the feedback, but just keep doing what you want to do. And also, like we talked earlier, learn what the player wants. Think about that. But like, yeah, just let go of social media, let go of all these likes, let go of all this stuff, and just make what you want to make, and see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard because this social media thing is weird. It's like good for the world, but also it can be crippling. It's like poison. It slowly gets into your skin and slowly like makes you feel bad about things. And it's like no, it shouldn't
Really
be like
does.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. I had to go through therapy for it a little while too, because it was just like it was affecting me so much, and I found that like there's a thing that I did that just helped so much. I would go to the beach for like hours, and I would like go into the water, and I would just watch the sunset in the water, and I would just stay there till after dark, and everybody was just gone. And there was something about that that kind of like, no matter what it was, because I would get so stressed out about like oh well, you know, this person's launching a game on the same day mine is, and like it's kind of similar, and like do I need to launch it before and like push all my schedule up, or do I need to launch it after, and then like they might take my sales, just like, you know, there's 1,000 things like that where it's just like it consumes me. And just going to the beach would like remind me that like, yo, we are a meat sack around a skeleton on a giant rock around a fireball, and none of it really matters, right? Like it's just
Yeah.
kind of, it's this like serenity of just like I'm in this giant vast ocean of water, and there's like thousands of creatures that don't care about me at all. Like, and it sounds weird to say I don't matter, because like, but in a weird way that kind of helped me so much, because it's like none of this stuff matters. None of this, the Instagram, the Twitter, like none of that
It's
stuff
so
matters.
true. I think I've been trying to get people to understand that more in my own like group and friends and stuff. But like when you start to not care about those things and realize that like we're all gonna get out of here like dead. Everybody's gonna die at some point. Nobody at the end of the day is gonna check mark, oh, because you got this many likes, you're gonna get more of this. It's like no, you're dead, you're dead. Like just do what you want to do. Be strategic about things at certain times, sure,
Yeah.
but like don't care about the likes. Don't care about when the game will be dropped. Just care about making great stuff and enjoying the process while you're doing it.
Yeah.
Because that's when you'll make good stuff. Like for instance, if you didn't go to the beach, you probably would have been more burnt out, or you might have got an idea from that beach. Like there's certain things that just come
Yeah.
from letting go, and then the ideas start to flow. It's this weird
Right.
thing.
Emptying my mind of all the stress just made the ideas like pop in, because it's like blank, right? And there's just so much more room for all the extra stuff. And so much of our brain is just occupied with Twitter, with likes, with social media, with all this stuff that like you don't have room for ideas. Like they can't come to you. You need to chill out. I agree with that 1,000%, and that's what I've been trying to do for my own kind of sanity, is reduce the input.
Now, so this is another question that might just combine like mental health and career, but what would you tell somebody who feels like they need to get somewhere fast? Like, oh, I'm gonna be a programmer, but I need to be a programmer like in a couple months because I need to get that job, because I need to pay for this, I need to do that, and like stresses them out that they just don't learn effectively. But yeah, what advice would you give for something like that?
I do think some stress is good, because I've experienced the opposite of this, right? So like when I sold my company and I was just road trip, I had like zero stress on anything, but that made me like give up on like life and just be completely complacent, right? So, but the other part of it
But
is
don't
like
you think it's like you needed that to get to a point where we are now?
maybe, Yeah, I think I tend to go in cycles of like
Yeah.
super chilled out, not doing anything, super stressed out, doing way too much. And I've been trying to find
We
the
need to find
balance
the
between
middle,
the
yeah.
two, right? Because it's like I constantly back and forth. I also think it depends kind of on your age, because I feel like I feel like I had a higher tolerance for stress in a weird way when I was younger. Like I just could kind of do more. As I kind of grow older and learn myself a little bit, I'm just like, this stuff's not worth it, right? It's just not. It's not that so much that I can't take it. It's just that it's not worth the effect. You understand it. You understand that, okay, this will get this done, but it also has this mental health effect, and it's just not a good trade-off. I would say you got to pay attention to who you are and kind of what stresses you out and what triggers you. A big philosophy in my life has been kind of the 80-20 rule. Like if there's an 80% stressor in your life, it's probably worth eliminating, right? Like if you just look at, like, out of 10 things, if you look at the top 2, they're probably the ones causing the majority of your stress. And what would your life be like if you just eliminated those completely? For me, I've actually had to, like, unfortunately cut people in my family out of my life for that reason, because they were the 80% stressors. And dude, it made my life so much better. It just like
The same people who said game dev is not a real job.
yeah. But, and you know, like it's one of those things that like it 80-20 works both ways too. Like there are things that you can do that take 20% of your effort and give you 80% of the results. Like you don't need 100% like crazy perfection. You need 80%. So like if you can post the right, like YouTube channel, for example, if I can focus, like I can make more videos, or I can focus on making the right videos, right? The right videos with the right titles and doing all that stuff. And that's the 80-20, because it's like 20% of the effort, but it gives me 80% of the results for like subscriber count or whatever. And I think the same thing is with stress. So like if you're super stressed out and you need to get somewhere fast, ask yourself why. Why do you need to get there fast? Like what's the point? Keep asking why until you kind of, figure out the core root of the cause. And if there is a legitimate reason, I think you can do it. You can do it less stressful. You can find ways to stress yourself out less and eliminate those big stressors. But what you might find is that you don't actually have to go anywhere fast. You can go places slow, and you can enjoy the journey, and you can kind of admire learning everything that you're learning and really understand it all and have fun with it. That's what I would say.
I like it. Now, when do you say this isn't for me? Like when you're trying something, you're trying it for months and months and months, and you're just like, it's just not catching on. Or when do you like, how do you go from like, okay, let me keep trying, to like, let me actually move to a different direction because this isn't for me?
That's a hard question. That's a really big question too. I have a video about this, and one of the things I say in the video, because there's no real way to tell. I think it depends on what you're doing and how long you've been doing it and all that stuff. And everybody has a different tolerance. Everybody has a different budget. Everybody has a different support system. But generally, when I look at a thing, like let's take a game, for example. How to start over on a game, or when should you start over? Like a lot of people ask me that. Like they start building a game, and then like they've learned so much building the game that they feel like they should start over, right? Or they feel like they should do whatever. Generally, it's when what you've created, you would not create in the same way, right? Like if you would do things completely differently, like completely different, not like 10% differently, I think it makes sense to kind of start over and kind of build everything up from your new knowledge and journey. But the problem is sometimes that's a never ending cycle though. Is like you're always learning stuff, so you always want to keep doing. So sometimes you have to put the priority of finishing over that stuff. As far as like when to quit and when to like pivot, I think quitting is actually an important part of game dev, and it's an important part of life. And I think prioritization can really help you make that decision. Learning what's important and what's not. And there's so many things, like personally in my business, because Game Dev Underground is a business too, right? Like I have Patreon, I have ad money, I have all this stuff, like, so I do it as a business as well. It's not just a community. There's so many things that I've learned with Game Dev Underground where it's like I've just been doing them because I've always been doing them, but it's like when do I stop? And sometimes I realize that, like, why am I doing these things? Well, because I've always done them. But why have I always done them? Because I thought they're important. Why did I think they're important? You just keep digging down the whys, and eventually you get to they're not really They're not really that important. And if that's the case, sometimes it's better to just let them go. There's also a framework that helps with prioritization. It's like urgent and important, urgent and not important, not urgent and important, not urgent, not important. And it's like a 4-quadrant kind of like worksheet that you can find. The urgent and important stuff you always want to do, and the not urgent and important stuff you always want to do. Anything that's not important you don't do, whether it's urgent or not. You know, like sometimes
I like that. So like,
sometimes people get stuck on like this is urgent, but it's not important, right? So they do it all, but they're doing a bunch of non-important stuff. So prioritization is a big part of like figuring out when to quit. And I do think having cyclical times to like reassess stuff helps too. Like if you want to make a game, you want to do games commercially and you want to do this, like maybe you should reassess after your first game. Like actually have a sit down where you plan, like on a Sunday, you're going to go through the revenue. You're going to go through how much time you spent. You're going to go through how much money you spent. You're going to go through like all this. And do you want to do it again? Like realistically, do you want to go through this process again? Do you think you can make it better, faster, cheaper, whatever? So cyclical kind of ritualistic points where you stop and kind of reflect, I think can help as well.
So it's interesting because you dropped out of college, but like, would you say to people who've maybe committed to college and then after making the first game after school, they're like, this isn't for me? Because they've already sunk their cost into that. And I think a lot of people deal with this where it's like, I already committed. I can't change my life around.
Yeah. This is a touchy subject because there's a lot of like, stay in school, kids.
Yeah.
But at the same time, my experience has not been that. My experience has been like, no, that's a very expensive, very slow way to learn how to make games. I do think if you want to make games, that's all you want to do is you just want to make games. Get a GameDev.tv course, man. Don't spend $80,000.
I try to tell everyone. I'm like, guys,
school. Spend $10 on a course. Like,
Yeah.
that's way more effective. It's faster too, and it's you can learn from experts and just learn game dev with the community of hundreds of thousands of people. If you want to get a job in game dev, I think that's different. I think university has certain benefits and they have connections with studios and stuff like that. I also think there's something to be said about the college experience, right? Of that whole like being away from your parents and meeting people and having fun and all that. But
I think that's all great. It's just the cost, though.
It's stupid cost. It's stupid cost, dude. I still have student loans. Like 10 years later, I still have student loans. It's stupid. It's the stupidest thing ever. And people are realizing now with the whole COVID thing, forcing them to take their classes online. People are realizing like, yo, this stuff's on YouTube.
Yeah. No, it's insane.
Why are we paying this much?
Especially for the Harvard, right? They're paying full price just for online classes. I'm like, that's some BS. What do you know?
No, it's not worth it at all. Like if you really want to learn something, there's almost always a better way to learn it than college. Like YouTube, finding a mentor, finding like, somebody in the trade. Like I remember I used to work on my old Camaro. I had twin Camaros, 86 Camaros that I loved. And I wanted to learn. I didn't know how to do any of this stuff. Half of it I learned from YouTube. Half of it I made a mechanic friend at AutoZone. I would just ask him all the time.
You're like, hey, man.
Yeah, exactly. Like if I would have went to mechanic school or something, I would have been in more debt. It would have taken me longer, and we would have to be doing these like stupid worksheets instead of actually working on my Camaros.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, if you want to learn the thing, there's almost always a better, faster way to do it in school.
Yeah, because it's just the fear of the unknown. It's like, but what do I do now? And it's like,
right.
You kind of go on your own, which is kind of like the new culture, I guess, is doing things on your own. But it's also super scary because before you had like, you follow this path and you're pretty much set. And now it's like,
I think that's the great lie, though. That's the lie they tell you is like they make it seem like this is the checklist for life. This is the thing that's going to answer all of your unanswered questions, right? You go here and you're going to figure out life based on this thing. But that's a lie, dude. It's not real. They don't answer any of those questions. In fact, sometimes you end up with more questions, or you end up with more questions and you end up with debt and you end up with a degree that you don't even end up using because it's like you changed your mind while you were there, right? Like, yeah, my degree did nothing. The other part of it too is like I built a massive marketing company. I've made 7 figures for clients and stuff like that in marketing. I've made so much money with that company for different clients with marketing and all kinds of stuff. And nobody ever once asked me for a degree. Not once.
It's
Not
this
one
weird
time.
lie. I swear, it's like GPA grades. It just disappears, and it's like, what was all that
Yeah,
for?
exactly. Exactly. It's stupid. And they make it seem like everybody ever is going to need a degree. And like people are really trained to think that. Like they think that they're going to go apply for a job and like they're not going to have a thing and the people are not going to hire them. Like you see these job listings where like you must have a bachelor's degree, you must have this, but I guarantee you especially if it's like some kind of creative work like an artist, if you send them a good ass portfolio, they're going to hire you way over the dude with like a doctorate's degree or whatever, right? They don't care about that. They care about you doing good work. And you got to be able to sell yourself and show that you can do good work. Like that's what it comes down to. It's not to this degree. The paper degree used to be proof that you could do good work. But now in our kind of gig economy, in our kind of like different specialized skill sets in our internet digital economy, like they just want somebody that can do the job effectively. So that's your job when you're applying or when you're filling out your resume or you're sending messages to these people. You got to prove that you can do the job effectively better than anyone else. It's not about the paper.
For people who want to get a job but don't want to go to school, and I know you said like you probably need it, but how can they maneuver so they don't have to go to school and still get that job?
I don't think they need it. I think it's the easy way. And easy is also a weird term though, because you'll take on $60,000 of debt just to get that job. So it's not easy in the long run, but it seems easy.
No, not at all. And then it increases over time, right?
Right. And the interest is stupid. Some of the interest rates on those are like 10%. And those loans, if you get an interest rate at 10%, your $60,000 loan is increasing faster than the minimum payment that you could pay it down. So it's like it's a debt that never goes away and constantly grows. Like, what is that? Anyway, don't get me on a rant with that. I will be here for a long time.
I would love it. I think a lot of people need to hear it.
But no, it's like, I think if it depends on what you do. If you're a programmer, it's a lot harder than like an artist. Because if you're a really good artist, your portfolio is just going to be everything, right? It's just going to show, hey, you can do this awesome stuff that no one else can do. If you're a programmer, you want to put together a portfolio of like stuff that you've done. You want to be specific on like what you did on the games too, because that's the other thing. There's so many programmers that I've like looked at their portfolios trying to hire a programmer, and it's like they say, oh, I worked on this game. Okay, what did you do? Did you do the UI, the AI? Did you do all the programming? Like, where are you at in kind of that spectrum? Because games are massive projects. I need to know exactly what you did. If you can put together a portfolio where you show me what you did and how, and like really show me visually like why it's interesting, I think it's fantastic. A mistake a lot of programmers make is they will link to their GitHub. And first of all, whenever you're getting hired, you're not usually getting hired by a programmer. You're getting hired by an HR department or something. That HR department doesn't know what any of that means. They're just like, what is this? I don't know. Is that good? Is that bad? Or what? Second of all, it doesn't actually show off like what you can actually create. So I think a really good portfolio that shows off visually to someone that may not be programmingly inclined is important. If you're an artist, it's doubly important because you have to show off the cool stuff. The other part of it too, I think, is the initial kind of contact, right? So like, I know a lot of people that have resumes that are just generic resumes that they send out to everybody. In my experience, it's almost always better to create a resume that's specific to that kind of tailors, not necessarily specific to the company, but specific to the position. So like, you don't have to include everything on your resume. You don't. You can take stuff off and make it seem like you like if you have, let's say it's, you're a manager or whatever, or let's say you're a programmer and you worked here as a programmer, you worked here as a programmer, you worked here, doing dishes, and then you work here as a programmer. You can just remove the dish part, right? And then it's a lot more consistent, right? And you can just see it looks like you're more qualified just by doing that. You can the other part of it is you can kind of massage the job descriptions and stuff like that to make them like if your job description was web development as a whole, like you manage their websites, but you're applying for a programmer position, you can talk specifically about the times you did the back end stuff, right? The programming stuff, right?
Oh, yeah,
so like I did back end programming for this company. You also did web development, but web development is less specific and it's not necessarily back end programming. So I think, like I said, a big part of it is kind of that you want to tailor kind of what you're sending to different people. When I've hired people before, it's almost always been because their resume, or it's usually, first of all, I only usually hire on portfolio. almost exclusively now. I don't know about other people, but whenever I need something, it's almost always portfolio. But when I've seen resumes, it's usually been the tailored ones that tend to work better. And I think, a lot of people just kind of gloss over that part of it. I don't know if that helps.
No, it does. But yeah, so that's for the resume. Now, what about if they want to make like a change? This is more for like older people. So like, let's say they were in a career and now they want to do games. Do you think they can do that? Do you think they feel like they're a little too late? Like, what do you say for the people who want to make the big change in their careers?
A big change in your career means that you need to be able to support yourself with it, right? That's what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's a little tricky. Generally, games are very risky, and this is why some of the YouTube channels bother me when they're just like, oh my god, here's a day in the life, and it's cool, and it's awesome, and I make thousands of dollars, and it's great. And it's like, yo, most people don't, okay? It takes a long time to get to that point. It takes a lot of work. It takes a bunch of stuff. So straight up quitting your job and just saying, I want to make indie games full time, while that makes a great Reddit headline and it'll get you some upvotes, it's not going to make a good career choice.
No.
So I have a video, by the way, that says, should you quit your job to do game dev? And it's 2 seconds. And I just say, hell no. That's the whole YouTube video. That's it. That's the whole thing. I love it. But so I think you should start on the side. You should start making stuff. First of all, make sure game development is for you. It's very hard. It's very complicated. It's a lot of different professions. There's a lot of different skill sets. It takes a long time. You will be doing a lot of stuff you never even conceived yourself doing. So start is step one. Just start making it. And it's a lot. I'm telling you, as someone that has put all of the pressure on my game design, that you want to remove that pressure if you can. If you have a side job and you're making money and it's paying the bills, making games without that pressure is so much more fun. It's so much better to just be able to make and not have that constant money pressure of like, holy shit, I need to pay the rent next month. So I would start on the side, but then, I would do the safe thing, to be honest, is I would, once your revenue is, livable, once you're to a point where you can kind of do it consistently, once you have experience, I think you can make that shift. And the unfortunate part is it's going to take you years minimum. It's going to take you years, like barring some kind of crazy, you're some prodigy or you make some kind of just crazy thing that no one's ever seen before. And you just, you're one of these runaway hits that we get like one a year. It's going to take you a long time. And I think you got to be patient with it. I think the other part of it too is like, you can do kind of what I did or what a lot of my YouTube buddies have done. And we find a way to supplement our game income with game dev related stuff, right? So like I make money on Patreon, I make money with YouTube ads, I make money on Twitch, I have Amazon affiliates. Like I have a lot of revenue sources that are related to game dev, but they're not game dev by itself. So like I do not make enough money from my games to make a living at it. Like I don't. Like, and thing is, some people will see my channel and they'll see my subscriber count and they'll be like, oh, well, it must be nice for you to make a living in games. I don't even come close with my games currently, right? Like we'll see how the Kickstarter does, but even that's probably not going to be anywhere near. I have to supplement my income with other places, but I'm passionate about it. And so I'm obsessed with making it happen, and I'm just being smarter about it. I'm not just going head deep and just crazy and diving in. I'm saying, okay, well, I'm going to supplement my revenue while I do it, and then, trying to build it up from there.
Wow, I would have never thought that. I would have assumed like everyone else, like you're making big money with YouTube and make money from games. I guess it's just like what's the reality of game dev? Can someone really make like a livable wage, livable like means in game dev? How can someone be truly happy in game dev?
I think they can. I think it's a lot harder than I think it is. Because here's the other thing. In game dev, for the same skills that you can use to make a game, you can make 6 figures in a programming company, in like an apps company, and like a software company, right? If you can make these complex games, you can make really decent money outside of the game industry. So it sucks because like it's a very highly profitable skill, but in game dev it's just kind of undervalued. Matter of fact, like the same exact job titles in a software company versus a game company, the game company is like half. So it's a passion-driven industry, first of all. You have to know that. Like, if you want to make games, big part of what's going to carry you through is going to be your passion. Like, do you love it or not? Because if you don't love it, you should just go do other stuff for the money, right? Like it's
Yeah.
easier. It's just faster. But I think it's a journey that I've been obsessed with. And one of the ways that I think part of the reason why people follow my YouTube channel is because I've been on this experiment quest. I've been trying to find ways. A lot of people are trying to figure out how to make more money with their games, right? I'm trying to figure out how to spend less time on my games and make the same amount of money. That's been my obsession. Is like I've been trying to make these 3 to 6 month game projects that are like fascinating, that are interesting, that I can sell for $10 on Steam or whatever, and kind of sell them and then move on, because that matches my attention span better. Like I got a 3 to 6 month attention span, and then I'm just kind of done. So it's really hard for me to finish a project after that. Murder Bunnies actually came out of that. Murder Bunnies is a game. It's only been in development for 4 to 6 months now, and not even that, but it's maybe a couple hours a day. Not even like maybe a couple hours, maybe 10 hours, 5-10 hours a week, maybe on stuff. So it's kind of it's a lower project that has not taken a lot of work, that comparatively to a video game. Video games have taken a shit ton of work. Like there's so much work.
Just take hours and hours and hours. Yeah.
So much. I started tracking my time, by the way, too. Once you see the spreadsheet of how much time you spend on something, you're just like, oh, I thought that system was going to take me 2 hours. It took me 2 weeks. And
yep, it's this harsh reality of game dev.
So I've been obsessed with the idea of like, rather than increasing the revenue, reducing the scope and seeing if you can make the same revenue. That's been something I've been chronicling on my channel. I've been kind of sharing that journey, and I've been sharing my experiments of like, because I also log all the time that I spend on everything too, so people can know like this is how much time I spent, this is how much I made, because your time is worth money too, right? Like Philophobia, I ended up making around like 10 grand on the launch.
Oh wow, and that's a lot.
It's a lot until you take into account I worked on it for 5 years.
Oh,
so I made $2,000 a year. Right?
Damn.
So you do that math, and then you're like, wait a second, hold on, right? So the time you spend on something is super important, because that factors into like what it's actually worth. And that was super important to me. So I'm trying to do these projects, and I do think there's a future for people to be able to try that, reduce the scope of stuff, reduce the amount of time that it takes, but also make something cool and polished and interesting. I think one of the biggest, scariest mistakes that people can make, especially when they're trying to switch careers, is to do exactly what I did. Start with a 4 or 5 year project, right? That's a horrible idea. But the problem is, like, realistically, Philophobia, even though it was a 5 year project, I could build that whole game in 3 to 6 months right now. Like, because I just have more skills, I have more knowledge, I have more understanding, I have more speed with the tool set, right? Like I could just rebuild the whole thing faster. And you have to understand that when you're first getting into it, it's just everything's going to take so much longer than you think it's going to take. It just is. And that's why it's really scary to just like try and switch careers as it. So I would definitely do it on the side. I said all that to say this. Definitely do it on the side until you until you see it happening.
Great answer. We went everywhere, but it was nice for people to hear that, because I think a lot of people have pressure. I think COVID brought that too. We're just like, oh my gosh, I've been working this much, and now that I'm at home, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm missing out on all this. I think when you realize what you're missing out on is when it hits you. Like before, you're like, oh, I can work 40 hours overtime, overworked, no problem. But then it's like, wait a minute, do I want that? Right. And so people have to start to like have these internal questions, like, what do I want in my life? What makes me truly happy? Am I doing it because I want to do it, or I'm doing it because people told me to do it? Because I think that's where people have a huge like stress load. It's like, I was supposed to get this dream job here, or like any game studio, because I want people to look up to me. I want this and that. I'm like, yeah, but like you have to ask yourself, look deep inside and be like, is this what everyone else wanted for you? Is this what you want? And like, why don't you find a way to make your life less stressful? Do games on the side, work somewhere else. Like I've seen a video too where a guy used to work at a software job, making tons of money, and then he quit because he just wasn't happy, and now works at a grocery store 3 days a week, has the condo, and it's just like rides his bike everywhere, and he's happier. Yeah. So it's like, find what makes you happy, understand that, go live that life, and don't care what anybody thinks. Who cares? Like
exactly. And I think that's one of the realizations I had when I sold my company, because I was making a ton of money with that company, but I just was not happy. But one of the things I realized through that whole road trip and that whole journey and getting back into game dev and all that is like, I wanted to build a lifestyle business. I don't want to be a millionaire anymore. I did win in my 20s, but I don't want that. I want a low stress, super exciting, super enjoyable thing that I could do that ends up paying the bills. And I've taken a huge money hit for that, right? Like I don't make anywhere near what I used to, but I really enjoy my work. I really love my work. I wake up thinking about my work. I go to bed thinking about it. And I think you don't have to build an ultra successful company. You don't have to build a company that gets acquired by Google. You can build a thing that's never designed to go beyond you, that can pay your bills, that can make you happy, right? Like a lifestyle kind of deal that just makes you interested in life and kind of is compatible with your psyche. And that's what I want to do.
Exactly. And you're helping hundreds of thousands of people. You're making an impact in people's lives. And what's more? What more do you need to do?
It's great.
Yeah. So let's get into how you got into GameDev.tv. How did that all happen?
Yeah. So Rick and I did collaboration. We're actually part of this group together where a bunch of like YouTubers and stuff, we get together and kind of talk and hang out. And I met him through there, and we did a couple collaborations. And you said you've seen some of our design videos of like our what makes it work kind of thing, where we'll both hop on a Zoom call, we'll both play through a game, and we'll just kind of talk about why the game works or why it doesn't. And I had so much fun with him on that. So much fun. I was just like, Rick, dude, I would do these for free. I don't even care about YouTube videos. Let's just get on and play games and like talk about design. Like, it was amazing. We did probably 10 of those. I keep telling him we need to do more of those because those
You
are
should.
great.
Yeah.
They didn't do well for views though, and we kept going back and forth because I was like, I don't care. I had fun. More people need to see this. I would
What do you
watch
do with
this
like
content.
Twitch though?
That's
I
what I
mean,
said. I think we need longer form versions of it. Yeah. So I think that, no, I'm not going to commit him to anything, but I would love to do that. If he had a Twitter, we could harass his Twitter with
Harass his Instagram or LinkedIn. I think he goes on LinkedIn.
We need to get him to do more because I would love it. But I started working with him and then doing that stuff, and we were having a good chat. We would meet up every once in a while, and then they needed a Godot course guy for their Kickstarter thing for the C# Godot stuff, and I was like, all right, I can do that. And I ended up doing a course for them, and that's kind of how I got involved. And then I ended up, like I have a bunch of marketing experience. GameDev.tv. Remember how I said Itch was like the better version of the Game Dev Underground website?
Yeah.
GameDev.tv is like the better version of like me trying to help people make games, right? So it's like, so I was like, you know what? Like GameDev.tv aligns with exactly my mission of like what I want to do. I want to help more people make more games, right? Like that's great. So we ended up working together, and now I'm helping out with marketing and business development stuff. And it's awesome. I think it aligns perfectly with my community. There's a lot of stuff, like every time we do a stream for GameDev.tv, I send my community over there and too. So it's like it's really cool. It's kind of merging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's become this one giant game dev community.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. And so, what are your plans? So we get the Murder Bunnies. So you're just working on getting ready for the Kickstarter?
Yeah. So my two main projects right now are Battleborn Tactics, which you can find on Steam, like if you want to wishlist it, which would help me tremendously. And then Murder Bunnies is launching on May 17th. The Kickstarter is launching, and then that'll be exciting. And those are the two things. I don't let myself work on more because believe me, I would I would keep going. I would keep starting stuff. Starting is so much fun.
It is. Finishing is the problem.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm limited right now. I'm at capacity. So I'm not allowed to mess with stuff. I'm allowed to prototype. I've had to make that difference in my head. Like prototyping is my hobby. Game development is like my job. So I can prototype as much as I want. It's like a hobby. But yeah.
It's great that you made a distinction.
I had to. I had to. Because then, like, whenever I wanted to create something, I'd be like, no, I feel guilty because I should be working on this thing and I should be finishing this thing. But, like, the distinction helps me kind of, like, have my hobby, have the thing that I do in my free time and, like, enjoy myself with no pressure. And then the job, I kind of have to have a little more pressure on it, right? Like, you have to have deadlines. You have to have stuff that you have to get done and all that. Like May 17th. Like, we got a lot of Kickstarter stuff to do. So it kind of works. It works well for me.
Where do you think the future of game dev is going to be going?
I think we're seeing the rise of a lot of really accessible, really simple to use tools. Construct 3 is a great example, but like even stuff like Roblox or Dreams or
Ooh, Dreams is really cool.
Yeah, so stuff like that makes game making a lot more accessible. I think there's going to be a lot of game developers that are not programmers by trade. There's going to be a lot of game developers that like are using tools that we're not used to make really cool things, and I'm excited to kind of see how that goes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because in the Dreams, someone's making a Avatar game, but they have no experience, no game development experience, no game design, no programmer, no art. They're just like, I'm gonna make it, and Dreams allowed them to, and they're getting like noticed by like tons of people. IGN is talking to them just for doing some small thing, but like that's what Dreams is allowing for people to be able to create their dreams, their ideas, their visions. Yeah, I think that's beautiful.
And it's great because like 10, 20 years ago, you had to have a team of 200 people. You had to have, a publisher. You had to have all this technical experience to make games. Now there are these tools that like lets, a 16-year-old in their living room on their PlayStation make one, right? Like Construct 3 is browser based. You can use it on a Chromebook. You can do it on an iPad, right? You can make games.
Yeah. Wow.
It's really great. Godot is browser based now too. They have a browser based version of that. Like we're seeing the accessibility of these game dev tools, and so I think the future is going to be more games than ever, but I also think it's going to be, we're going to see the renaissance of games, because making it more accessible means that people that otherwise have these amazing creative brains that could create the next amazing thing, they've never been technically capable of building something like this, but now with these tools they can, and I'm excited to kind of see what they come up with.
Me too. It's going to be beautiful. So this has been awesome, and near the end we have the last thing. We do like a challenge, just like the lectures. So you can come up with a challenge for all the game dev listeners. Anything, could be game design, could be programming, could be whatever you think of. It could be life challenge. But yeah, a little challenge for the students.
I think showing your work is important, and I think sharing your stuff is important. So I challenge everybody to tweet me at Tim Ruswick a picture or a GIF of their current project.
I like that. Can't wait to see what people post.
Yeah, I'm excited.
But yeah, thanks for coming on, Tim. This has been so much fun.
Thanks for having me. It was a ton of fun. I enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, we got really deep with the whole college thing.
Gave you way too much detail about my life, but we had fun.
That's good. Now we know. I can't believe you were a dropout. Never would have thought that. Okay, but it makes the story better.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so I usually hand the mic to you to just do any last minute shout outs, quotes, whatever you want to leave us with. And thank you for coming on, and the mic's all yours.
Thank you. I would love it if everybody could wishlist Battleborn Tactics on Steam and follow Murder Bunnies on Twitter or follow it on Kickstarter. And, keep making games. Finishing your stuff is really, really important, but, life-work balance of fitting it into a life that makes yourself happy is important too. So keep making games and keep moving forward.
Well, that's it. Thanks for listening. You can find all courses at GameDev.tv or in the show notes at a discounted price. Get started with your game development journey today.